Nietzsche died alone. I think about that more than I probably should. Here was one of the most brilliant minds in human history, a man who looked at the world with more honesty than most people can handle, who saw patterns in human behavior, in love, in power, in self-deception, that nobody else had the stomach to name out loud, and yet died alone, spent the last 11 years of his life in mental collapse, never had a relationship that lasted, never had a home that felt like one. Now, you could look at that and say his ideas about relationships were worthless. If he couldn't make them work, why are we listening to him? But I think the opposite is true. I think the very fact that he understood it so clearly and still couldn't live it is what makes his warning so important. Because he was describing something he saw in himself as much as in everyone else. And that kind of honesty, the kind that looks inward without flinching, is the rarest thing in the world. So tonight, we're going to talk about what Nietzsche actually warned us about. Not the philosophy textbook version, the real version. The one that'll make you think about your own life for the next few days, whether you want to or not. Before we get into the warning, let me give you the Nietzsche most people never meet. Forget the edgy quotes on Instagram. Forget the association with every philosophy bro who's trying to sound interesting. The real Friedrich Nietzsche was something much stranger and more interesting than that. He was a professor at 24. 24. The youngest person ever appointed to his chair at Basel University. He was writing things so far ahead of his time that his colleagues thought he'd lost his mind. Some of them weren't entirely wrong. He was also desperately, achingly lonely. He fell in love with a woman named Lou Salome, one of the most brilliant women of her era, and she rejected him twice, choosing instead to live with his closest friend. That heartbreak broke something in him, but it also clarified something. It gave him a specific, lived, first-person understanding of what happens when a person brings their deepest self into contact with another person and finds it returned empty. And from that lived understanding, he wrote some of the most honest things anyone has ever written about love, relationships, and the peculiar ways human beings manage to destroy the very connections they're desperately reaching for. That's who we're listening to tonight. Not the meme, the man. Nietzsche's first warning is probably the most uncomfortable one, and it goes like this. Most people don't actually want a real relationship. They want a mirror. They want someone who agrees with them, who validates them, who tells them their decisions were good, their instincts were right, their worst moments were understandable. They want someone who makes them feel more comfortable in whatever version of themselves they have already decided to be. And here's the brutal thing Nietzsche noticed. This works for a while. It feels like love. It feels like connection. Two people wrapped in mutual validation, each one making the other feel safe and seen and correct. But slowly, and this is what he was warning about, it becomes a trap. Because a relationship built on mutual comfort never challenges either person to grow. It becomes a warm, familiar bubble. And bubbles, however comfortable, are fragile. The moment real life pushes against them, the moment actual difficulty arrives, they don't hold. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. What he was saying is this: a real relationship, one that actually makes both people better, requires friction. Not conflict for its own sake, not cruelty. but the honest friction of two genuine individuals who bring their actual selves into contact with each other. Two people who occasionally disagree, who challenge each other, who see the other clearly enough to say, gently but honestly, "That's not right. And here's why." That's harder than a mirror, way harder. But it's the only kind of relationship that actually goes somewhere. Stop looking for someone who agrees with you. Start looking for someone who makes you better. It is not a lack of love, but a lack of friendship that makes unhappy marriages. This one hits differently when you really sit with it. He's not saying passion doesn't matter. He's not saying attraction is irrelevant. He's saying that the thing that actually holds a relationship together over time, the thing that keeps two people choosing each other on the difficult days, not just the easy ones, is something that looks a lot more like friendship than like romance. Genuine liking, genuine respect, the feeling of being truly known by another person and having that knowledge not diminish their interest in you, but deepen it. Here's what modern culture gets catastrophically wrong about this. We spend enormous amounts of energy trying to be attractive, looking good, being impressive, performing the version of ourselves most likely to be desired, and almost no energy at all on being genuinely interesting to spend an ordinary Tuesday with. Nietzsche saw this. He watched people, himself included, throw themselves at the pursuit of passion while neglecting the quieter, slower, more sustainable thing that actually makes a shared life possible. The couple that falls apart after 3 years didn't run out of love. They ran out of friendship. They never actually built it. They were too busy managing the performance to notice they had nothing underneath it. And the couple that makes it to 40 years, they'll tell you the same thing almost every time. They just genuinely like each other. Simple as that. Profound as that. Be the kind of person someone would want to have a bad day with. That's rarer than you think. In individuals, insanity is rare. But in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. Nietzsche wasn't just warning about how individuals behave in relationships. He was warning about what happens when relationships are shaped by what everyone around you thinks they should look like. And this is where the modern warning gets really sharp. We live in the most relationship advice-saturated era in human history. There are entire industries built around telling you what a healthy relationship looks like, what to want, what to expect, what is acceptable, what is not, how long it should take to get serious, what the milestones should be, what counts as a red flag. And most people, without quite realizing it, absorb all of this and start measuring their actual, specific, completely unique relationship against a generic template that has nothing to do with their actual lives. They look at their own connection, and instead of asking, "Is this good for us?" they ask, "Does this look like what a good relationship is supposed to look like?" That shift from lived reality to performed ideal is exactly what Nietzsche was warning about when he talked about herd mentality. The tendency to outsource our most personal decisions to the collective opinion of people who have never met us and never will. Your relationship does not need to look like anyone else's. It doesn't need to hit the same milestones on the same timeline. It doesn't need to match the aesthetic of what love looks like on any particular platform. It just needs to be real, between the two people actually living it. The most dangerous opinions about your relationship are the ones you never questioned, because everyone around you seemed to share them. The secret for harvesting from existence the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment is to live dangerously. This is his most misunderstood warning, and the one most likely to be taken completely out of context. When Nietzsche said live dangerously, he wasn't talking about being reckless. He wasn't advocating for chaos or cruelty or self-destruction. He was talking about the willingness to be fully, genuinely, vulnerably present in your own life, including in your relationships. Because the safest thing you can do in a relationship, the thing that feels like protection, is to never fully show up, to keep a little of yourself in reserve, to maintain enough emotional distance that if things go wrong, you can tell yourself you were never really all the way in. And Nietzsche's warning was that safety will cost you everything worth having. The depth of what you can receive from another person is exactly proportional to the depth of what you are willing to offer. Not performing depth, not presenting the carefully curated version of your inner life that you've decided is safe to show. Actual depth, actual presence, actual willingness to be known. That's dangerous. Of course it is. You might be rejected. You might be misunderstood. You might offer your real self and find it returned with indifference. But the alternative, the safe, hedged, managed version of intimacy that most people settle for, is not safety. It's just a slower kind of loneliness. Half presence is not protection. It's just a way of being lonely with company. So what do we actually do with this? 4 warnings from a man who lived over 100 years ago. What do they mean for relationships in this specific, distracted, chronically online era? I think they mean more now than they ever have. Because everything Nietzsche was warning against, the mirror relationship, the friendshipless passion, the herd template, the managed emotional distance, all of it has been amplified by the particular strangeness of how we connect now. We have more mirrors than ever before, more validation at our fingertips, more curated images of what love is supposed to look like, more ways to stay half present while appearing fully engaged. And we have, I'd argue, less genuine friction, less honest challenge, less willingness to show up as a real, flawed, complicated person and ask another real, flawed, complicated person to do the same. The 4 warnings applied today look something like this. Find someone who makes you better, not just someone who makes you comfortable. Build something that could survive a bad Tuesday, not just something that looks beautiful on a good Saturday. Make your own rules about what your relationship should be, and then actually fully, dangerously show up for it. That last one is the hardest and the most important. I want to come back to where we started. Nietzsche died alone. Understanding something and living it are different things, sometimes very different things. And I think he knew that. I think part of what gave his writing about relationships its specific, almost painful clarity was the fact that he was describing a gap he lived in personally. That gap between what we understand and what we actually do is not a reason to dismiss the understanding. If anything, it's a reason to take it more seriously, because the warning isn't, be like Nietzsche. The warning is, learn from what he saw clearly enough to write down, even when he couldn't fully live it himself. That's what honest philosophy actually is. Not a set of instructions from someone who figured it all out. A set of hard-won observations from someone who looked at the world without looking away. and left what they saw for the rest of us to do something with. 4 warnings: the mirror trap, the friendship deficit, the herd template, and the cost of half presence. None of them are comfortable. All of them are worth sitting with. If this kind of conversation is what you're looking for, subscribe to Mind Tactics Lab. Every week we go into the ideas, the warnings, and the honest observations about human nature that most people are too busy or too comfortable to spend time with. And tell me in the comments, which of Nietzsche's 4 warnings landed the hardest for you? The mirror, the friendship, the herd, or the half presence? I'm genuinely curious.